What's happening, Bills Mafia? What's up, UB Bulls fans? Ryan Thomas here on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, coming at you with another awesome episode of the show with another awesome guest, none other than Khari of the BLEAV Podcast Network, the Bullseye Podcast. I'm so excited to have Khari back on the show. This is his second appearance. The last time Khari and I sat down and discussed the gridiron, the game that we love, was on Instagram Live. Now we're in the new and improved stage of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, and Khari decided to join me once again. Thank you for joining me, Khari. What's going on, buddy?
Not much, right? Thanks for having me on. It's onward and upward, it looks like, being able to have everything that you've got going over here, but thankful to be able to come on and share, and obviously talking ball is my favorite thing in the world. So love to be able to help you and be able to share some thoughts on our Western New York teams here.
Of course, we got a lot to discuss on this show. For anyone that is a Buffalo Bills fan, for anyone that loves the collegiate ranks, the UB Bulls football team, Khari is as dialed in as anybody with that squad, their new head coach. We're going to get to all of that. This is a little bit of a 2021 Buffalo Bills as well as a little bit of a 2021 Buffalo Bulls season preview show. A lot to discuss. First and foremost, though, the biggest storyline right now within Western New York is the Josh Allen contract extension. I think that's a moment, Mr. Demos, where we will all remember where we were when we heard the news that Josh Allen got this massive $258 million contract. It's a 6-year deal with $150 million guaranteed. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the contract, and how did it leave you feeling when you had first heard the news?
So you said, everybody will remember where they were at. Now, this was Friday when it happened, right?
Yes,
Last
it was
week, Friday. So I think I was working here. I was working from home, doing some newspaper work, and there's this app I have. It actually is the Dynasty app that we're going to be using with Sleeper. They I get updates about everything, especially fantasy football and things like that. But this app is it's beyond quick. It's it's stuff. News is coming out before ESPN or NFL Network, anything like that. So get the the update. Breaking news: Josh Allen signs his extension. I was like, oh, okay, and it was just more so about it being a long term 6-year deal more than anything. But once I saw the numbers and how things shake out, I'm a big fan of the move. First and foremost, it comes back down to the player. I mean, Josh Allen, we saw what he put together in 2020. He became an elite quarterback in the NFL, and I think it's been crazy to see because of just the progression. Obviously, I was a critic when he first came in. When we drafted him in 2018, or when the Bills drafted him in 2018, I just was, I was a fan of guys like Lamar Jackson, even Josh Rosen, and Baker Mayfield. Just knowing what he put together in college, I thought he was going to have a solid NFL career. But Josh Allen, it was never about the talent. The talent was always there. It was just about molding him and crafting him, and I think it's just beautiful to see the fact that he has taken those steps, but the Bills organization has really built so much around him, whether it's bringing in Brian Daboll, whether it's having the stability of Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, whether that's, building an offensive line, adding a Stephon Diggs, and, just the list goes on. So I think it's beautiful to see. And I think for the Bills, they have to be very excited about, first of all, to be able to have your franchise quarterback locked up for 8 seasons. That's tremendous. But I think too, I know everybody gets caught up in the numbers and, 150 guaranteed, 260, across the span of the deal. But at the same time too, this contract doesn't even really kick in until I believe it's the 2023 season, because this will be Josh Allen's 4th season. So he's still on his rookie deal. And obviously they're going to they picked up his 5th-year option. So the Bills really aren't going to have to face the financial ramifications of this until a couple years down the line. And, I think that'll be good for them because, they've got a young core already. I mean, a lot of the best young players or the best players on the team are 27 or younger. So, I think the Bills are in a spot where, they got a guy that they know can continue to grow too. It's going to look like this deal may be a team-friendly deal as the years go on, especially as the new cap resets once the COVID money kind of shakes out and things like that. And I think also too, just the fact that you pay him now, I think it's twofold. You pay him now when, hey, he's coming off of arguably the greatest quarterback season in Bills history. His value could only go higher than what it's at now. But also too, God forbid if he gets hurt, yes, it's always tough being able to having to pay a guy and then, seeing them get hurt and things of that nature. But that would have put the Bills, I think, in an even more precarious spot because it's like, hey, do you pay this guy all this money after he got hurt? Or would you rather pay him now up front, have him set and locked in for, the foreseeable future and, not necessarily have to worry about, some of those other things down the line. So like I said, I think it's a win-win for both sides. And just knowing that, Buffalo will be Allentown for a while is a pretty unique and exciting thing.
I love that. Buffalo will be Allentown for a while. That's really awesome. And I love the fact that you touched on that this is an 8-year deal, essentially, because it doesn't kick in for another 2 years. So, and Allen said it best. I'm here for 8 more years, guys. I'm here for 8 more years. It's not 6, it's 8. So that's
and
really,
hopefully more, he said.
Right. And hopefully more. Yeah. And the fact that he focused on more than 8 years, he's looking at the entirety of his career being here in Buffalo. And it kind of goes within the tagline here as the first segment of the show begins. At Josh Allen's extension, it provided me with a perspective on where he was to where he is now and where he could be. That's the next kind of portion of it. Where he was this very raw, as you said, you can never doubt the talent that he had coming out of Wyoming physically. It was just a matter of kind of molding him at the pro level. And he had so many naysayers, even within the collegiate ranks. Then you add in the pro naysayers, and it was like triple. Well, it seemed like nobody really believed in him outside of Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, as they were the ones that made that move to go up and get him with the 7th overall pick. So this guy is the favorite son of Buffalo now. He's been embraced by the community as he has embraced the community. And I'm just so thankful. Khari, I thought that this would not happen. I mean, and that's what has me so excited about it. I thought not that it wouldn't happen ever at all. I just thought that these contract negotiations are tricky. There were reports by plenty of people that these contract negotiations would be tabled to next offseason. And then all of a sudden, this story just came out, as you said, on the Sleeper app, which we'll be using for the Dynasty League for the show, which I'm very excited for that. We'll get into that discussion a little bit later. But the fact that you have a news like this coming out of nowhere it's safe to say, Buffalo's favorite son, it's just awesome to get this out of the way prior to what is expected to be a Super Bowl contending season for the Buffalo Bills, right?
Most definitely, yeah. I think it's, just thinking about, like I mentioned before, the fact that this contract comes now, because, hey, let's face it, God forbid this happens, but, what if Josh Allen has a tough season in 2021, reverts back to some of the things that we thought were, chinks in his armor, I would say, in his first 2 seasons in the NFL, then where do you shake things out with a deal? So I think to be able to get the deal done now, it does the Bills a nice service in knowing that, hey, we will be able to play this out over the next 2 years on his rookie deal to really still do some evaluation. But at the same time, too, it's also really helping both sides. Josh Allen is only going to be making, he's scheduled to make for the 2021 season, he's scheduled to make about, let's see, just looking at just over $7 million this season. So, he's, and then also just fast forward to the 2022 season, same thing. And the team, I'm sure, is okay with paying $8.48 million for a player option, or a team on the team option. My apologies, but just thinking about to get this deal done now, like you said, because I think when it comes to deals like these, the more they linger around, the more that becomes more of a talking point than the actual play on the field. And I think, for a guy like Josh Allen, even just hearing some of his comments about taking care of this deal and getting it done, he said, there were people asking about, all the specific numbers and this and that. He said, I'm not the one at the negotiating table. So I'm just worried about playing football and, taking care of what I need to do every day. So, I think for him to be able to have this behind him also, I think is a huge hurdle, because, a guy like Josh, he's shown that, if he has the right headspace, the sky's really the limit for him. When he gets a little flustered, that's when things may shake him off or slow him down a little bit. So I think this is really something that allows him to just play and let it rip.
Yeah, I agree. And I love the kind of agreement storyline as well. Like Chris Brown and Steve Tasker were talking on One Bills Live that he had absolutely nothing to do with the negotiating at all. Like he wanted nothing to do with it. He didn't even really care. Not to say he didn't care, but he's more focused on trying to finish what they started last year and really seal the deal on getting back to that AFC title game and winning it, whether it's against Kansas City or somebody else. And, I think that that the fan base has to be elated. I know I am. I know you are. Just it's a great morale boost for, an offseason that has had its fair share of distractions, with the Cole Beasley stuff and, everything like that. It's nice to have this distraction gone out of the way. We won't have to worry about it for 8 years. And Josh Allen's our guy. Hopefully things continue to prosper and, improve for him. And, the Buffalo Bills will be much better for it. They'll only go as far as your quarterback. So it's a quarterback driven league, as we know. So, I'm excited to see how this season pans out with all these expectations, and we'll get into that. But, something that I heard from a Bills beat writer, he said that Josh Allen has been chatting it up with all of the rookies as well as the undrafted rookies, trying to figure out what their stories are, trying to figure out where they come from and what makes them a Bill, what makes them a true Bill or want to be a true Bill. That just shows the leadership that he possesses, and it kind of is an awesome segue to a draft class that I think is extremely intriguing in how the Buffalo Bills front office attacked their weaknesses, getting the pass rusher and Gregory Rousseau, and then doubling down on that position with Boogie Basham when only a year prior they took AJ Epinesa. I want to get your thoughts on this 2021 Buffalo Bills draft class. There are quite a few guys on this draft that provide the Bills with just simple depth. But what are your thoughts on, going back to April in that draft? Do you feel like the Bills got better in this draft? Do you feel like they are much better than what they were, a season ago with this draft class coming in?
Yeah, I do think the Bills got better. I think I want to make it even, more so about the total package of the offseason, because I feel as though, one of the biggest things coming into the offseason was the fact that we just weren't sure, like, hey, this team has the potential to be very different. Matt Milano being a free agent, Daryl Williams being a free agent, just thinking about, having what were we going to do with the defense, or what were the Bills going to do with the defensive line? Just so many different things. And, for the Bills to be able to really get off scot-free and keep it business as usual, bring just about everybody back. You replace John Smoke Brown with Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, you really can't beat that. And then, fast forward then to the draft at that point. I think two things are really exciting about what the Bills did in the draft. First off, depth is huge. And I think to be able to retool the offensive line a little bit, with some guys like Spencer Brown, Tommy Doyle, Jack Anderson was a 7th round pick as well. But just to think of all these names that the Bills added, I think those guys could potentially be, starters down the line. Hey, maybe they are in rotation later on or sooner rather than later. But, I think that depth in the trenches is huge, but especially on the defensive line. Personally, I thought prospect-wise, I thought Boogie Basham was a better player than Greg Rousseau coming out, and that's no offense to Greg Rousseau. He's just very raw. He obviously missed the 2020 season, but at the same time, too, another guy like Josh Allen, where the sky's the limit, the talent is off the charts, and I think being able to, because just personally thinking of defensive lines, offensive lines as well. I haven't played offensive line, but specifically defensive lines. I've always been a fan of the defensive lines that are deep and you rotating a bunch of guys. You're having 6, 7, 8 different guys play because, as an offensive lineman, you're taught to never come off the field. So when you're seeing, you got one dog lining up against you, or 3, 4 dogs lining up against you on the defensive line, and then, they're rotating a whole fresh new lineup of them. It's like, man, like we can't even catch a break. And these guys are coming in fresh. And, I just think it's something that the Bills need. That was one of the biggest struggles that the Bills had in 2020 was just being able to stop the run and get to the quarterback, with, low sack rate and things like that. So I think it's important to be able to build up in those trenches, but also too, I think there are some guys that can compete right away. And that's my second point is, just some of the value that the Bills got. I mean, just thinking about in the 6th round alone, you get a guy like Marquez Stevenson, DeMar Hamlin, who obviously played with Dane Jackson at Pittsburgh, and then also Rashad Wildgoose, who, could be another guy who competes in the secondary. So I think those guys are all viable to be able to make this team and, potentially contribute this season. So I would say the Bills did a very solid job with the draft. It's always tough to think of a team that, was in the Final Four. How do you improve on, being a game away from the Super Bowl?
Right.
They saw their biggest flaws though, and I think they really improved them. And so, just coming into the 2021 season, it's looking like the Bills are primed for another run. So it's just exciting to think that they're at this point as a one of the more successful franchises in the NFL.
Who would have thought after the first, at least, 25 years of my life that the Bills would be where they are now? Yeah, so I definitely agree. You touched on something that's really, I think, it was my thought going into the draft, asking ourselves the question, how does this team get better? That each team is tasked, that's the task. They have to try to get better, in the draft any which way they can and improve, minimize those weaknesses, maximize the strengths. But the Bills had somewhat a luxury of having obvious weaknesses because they were so few. They made themselves more glaring. And to me, throughout the entire season, as great as their offense was, we just couldn't get after the quarterback. We just didn't have that rotational defensive line depth. We didn't have Starr out there. Right. He opted out. That was a huge loss, I think, to the front 7, front 4 especially, of course. And, to double down on Gregory Rousseau and Boogie Basham, you touched on the Boogie Basham is, a higher rated prospect by most just based on the full sample size that you have of Boogie Basham at Wake Forest in comparison to Gregory Rousseau at the U. But then you watch the Bills, to me, didn't just draft solid players. They drafted supreme athletes, guys that are so eye-popping in terms of their measurables. Gregory Rousseau is 6'7.5", 265 pounds. There are very few defensive ends that can move as quickly as he can, given the size that he has. He reminds me of a Mario Williams type player at that defensive end position. And Boogie Basham, a little bit more of a traditional defensive end. Out of all the players, though, that you see the Bills taking here on the ticker of picks, rounds 1 to 5 on the bottom. And then I also have rounds 6 to 7. Who is the one guy that really jumps out at you as like that truly immediate impact guy? It could be any of these guys, but I'm curious to see who is that one guy that you could see being that one immediate impact player.
Yeah, it's really it's going to be tough for guys like Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle to get on the field right away. Obviously, having guys like Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams at tackle, I mean, those are two Pro Bowlers, so
Right.
they're more rotational pieces. And same with Stevenson. I think he's a guy that is just going to learn in that receiver room. I mean, it's crazy to think from the days of having Lee Evans and Roscoe Parrish and Stevie Johnson and everything, to think that the Bills have one of the deepest receiving cores in the league is insane. But I would say probably, again, Boogie Basham, I think, first off, just talking about Greg Rousseau, I like what you mentioned about, his elite size. And I mean, I think the coolest thing about Rousseau is he's a guy, I term him more of a defensive lineman. He's not a true end. He's not a true tackle, but he can play either spot because, he did a lot rushing the passer as a from the interior at Miami. So I think that's one thing the Bills should be able to take advantage of this year is, knowing that he is a guy who's been comfortable inside. So, why not? If it's not broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, too, I think Boogie Basham is just because he's a very his floor is very high. I mean, let's face it, if he had came out after the 2019 season, he could have snuck into the first round of the 2020 draft. So to think that, yes, he might have fallen off this past season a little bit, hey, there was a lot of outside factors, going into the 2020 campaign, especially at the college football level. So I think, hey, maybe now that he's in a, quote unquote normal state of being in a traditional training camp and everything like that, I think he's a guy that's going to be able to compete at that right defensive end spot. Mario Addison is getting up there in years, and obviously Jerry Hughes is getting up there in years as well. And so to be able to keep those guys fresh, you've got two young dogs like that. And I think just knowing that Boogie's had a lot of experience playing at the collegiate level and being I believe a 3 or 4 year starter with Wake Forest.
Right.
And actually shout out to Coach Dave Clausen, Western New York native, the head coach at Wake Forest there. But yeah, so for Boogie to come in and I think with him just knowing that he's had so much playing time, he made his debut in 2017. So, got a lot of snaps for the Demon Deacons. So I think he's going to be a guy that can come in and compete right away. Obviously AJ Epinesa has been getting a lot of rave reviews as well. So maybe he is fended off a little bit. But again, as I said, I think the defensive line just needs to be on a rotation.
I agree. The fact that we have Epinesa, Boogie Basham, Gregory Rousseau, and then you throw in the fact that, a few years ago we drafted a guy by the name of Ed Oliver, who
Right.
I truly feel he hasn't even touched his full potential yet. And maybe these guys can somewhat not only, I don't want to say motivate, because I think Ed Oliver has always been a motivated guy, but that new surge of youth is really going to help a player like Ed Oliver, and I think it's going to help Starr in his return back to the team. I've heard nothing but good things about his physical condition heading into this season, despite the fact that he was quote unquote off. He was working out, hitting the weights. He looks physically better than he has in the last few years. So I have big expectations, Khari, for this front four and this front seven. I mean, I've talked about him a lot on this show, and moving on from the draft class, I think the one guy that has the most pressure outside of Josh Allen in terms of season expectations, who can dictate the Buffalo Bills season expectations outside of Allen, to me, is Tremaine Edmonds. I want your take on the state of Tremaine Edmonds' game, his progression, and what the expectations are for the defense within Tremaine Edmonds manning that middle. And obviously we'll dive deep into overall what our expectations are for the Bills this season.
Yeah. So just talking about Tremaine specifically, it's really the same conversation we had with Josh Allen. And it's so crazy to think that in the 2018 draft, you had two cornerstone pieces. You drafted your quarterback of the future, the quarterback of your defense in the first round that year. And both same thing, both extremely, extremely gifted, physically talented players, but guys that needed to really sharpen their tools, sharpen the iron, and really be able to hone in on themselves and hone in on those skills to be able to maximize their full potential. With Josh, I think we've seen that. I think we've seen that he's gotten to that elite status. With Tremaine, he's had so many highs, but he's had some bumps in the road too. So I think for him, it's really just going to come down to consistency. I think, with him, just being able to be a pretty strong coverage linebacker, that's already a major asset. But I think, just being able to clean some things up in the running game and, just knowing that I think now too, he's got some talent. Some of the talent that was in front of him in 2018 and 2019 that really helped him to show who he is and who he can continue to progress and become as a player. I think those guys are around him now. I think with the defensive line being as deep as it is now, you obviously know what those guys in the secondary are going to be doing as well. And obviously being able to bring a guy like Matt Milano back. I try to tell people this all the time. I think Tremaine Edmonds Matt Milano might be a better player on the field in terms of production and things of that nature. But I think Tremaine Edmonds, his role is that much more important, being the mic of the defense. And, especially in a defense like Sean McDermott's and Leslie Frazier's, where they put so much responsibility on the linebackers. So, I think it is definitely going to be important to see what Tremaine Edmonds puts together this season. I mean, it's year 4 for him. He has been a Pro Bowler already. He has been a guy who a lot have expected out of, and hey, some of those expectations he might not have lived up to some of those last season, but I think I mean, first of all, this guy is so young. I mean, right. The fact that I believe I'm going to take a look here now, but
he was 19 when he was drafted.
Yes, 19. This is a guy that we're talking about right now that's still only 23 years of age. Like, the sky is the limit for him. And, I think he really is just scratching the surface. And I mean, if you're talking about a guy who's already played in a Pro Bowl, a guy who's two Pro Bowls, and who's had over 100 tackles in seasons and things of that nature. Like, this is a guy that has still not even scratched his potential yet. And to think, he's got some of those accolades, it's amazing. So, I'm that, like you said, I'm definitely expecting a lot from Tremaine, because if let's say he has the leap that Josh had from 2019 to 2020, I mean, this defense could be again one of the top, as it was in 2018 and 2019.
Yeah, I agree. It's a talking point that I don't think, for whatever reason, it's kind of slid under the radar. Like all of the success that the Bills offense had last season, people are just talking about that and how that will carry over. It's like, well, no, this defense was the focus of the offseason with who we've drafted. Emmanuel Sanders was a solid add, and I love Emmanuel Sanders. Mm-hmm. But I am just as curious, if not more curious, to see how this defense improves, because there was room for improvement last year, of course. And you mentioned this secondary. I mean, for as much as Sean McDermott's coaching, X's and O's wise, his scheme relies on the middle linebacker, Luke Kuechly, obviously being in Carolina, and
Thomas Davis,
and now Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano. But I can't think of a secondary that has played as well and as durable as Trey White, Micah Hyde, and Jordan Poyer. Those 3 players have been constants in the Buffalo Bills lineup, just in terms of a showing up, putting the pads on perspective, let alone their game. I mean, that shows how dependable and reliable they are in and of itself. And then their game on top of it is top notch. So if we can apply more pressure to the quarterback via the new ads, Tremaine Edmonds takes that next step up, and the secondary continues to play like they have the last 3-4 years, I think this defense is one of the best in the league, right? So that's something for Bills fans, I think, to be excited about, just as excited about.
I mean, people, obviously for like you mentioned, the offense was, stealing all the headlines last season, but people forget when the Bills went on their major streak down the stretch of the season. The defense was really getting back to what it had been before. And, like you mentioned, Trey, and I mean, to have a top 5 corner on one side, and then you got arguably the best safety tandem in the league behind him. I mean, it's really just just kudos to those guys for what they've been able to put together, and being able to they're really just the backbone of the team. They've been doing it for so long at this point.
Yeah, and they're not. The offense is known as like the more flashy positions in today's game, but you're watching true football guys like yourself and myself. We're watching and we're saying, these are the guys that are doing the manual labor. These are the guys that are putting the hits on. These are the guys that are really manning that defense and schematically trying to stop these really good offenses that the Bills have to play, that the Cleveland Browns, the Kansas City Chiefs. New England is going to be a little bit better, I think, on paper. They should be,
They should be, yep.
So this defense, I have high expectations for it. When you look at the fact that this 2021-2022 season, when we look at expectations, right, this season is different than any other because this is a 17-game season schedule. Do you think that's going to hurt teams, or do you think that's just, one more game, no big deal? I'm kind of in the middle. I want your thoughts on this new 17-game schedule.
Yeah, I think it's really going to depend on, the team, because I feel like a team like the Bills, where they're a deep team. So I don't necessarily think an extra game hurts them. But at the same time too, like, God forbid, imagine if Josh Allen were to miss some time. Like, yes, we do have the Bills have a good backup in Mitchell Trubisky, one of the most experienced. To think your backup quarterback's the number 2 pick in the draft, he's got a lot of talent. But on the flip side too, that's tough. But hey, it's a 17-game season now, so you don't necessarily have to rush him back and things of that nature. So I don't know. I think it really just depends on the team situationally. I think about a team like the Tennessee Titans. I think the Titans, on paper, very, very electric offensively. We've seen what Ryan Tannehill's been able to put together down there, and obviously King Henry and AJ Brown teaming up with Julio Jones. But if they have some right, seriously. So, but if they have a string of injuries, it could get tough. They don't have as much depth as some other teams. So I just think it's really going to play into each team specifically. But as I feel like when it comes to the NFL season, more so than other sports, especially because of the nature of the game and just how physical, of a sport it is, it's really going to depend on how, those injuries shake out, one, but also two, I think with how fast teams start out. I think with the Bills, just pulling up their schedule here, obviously opening up with Pittsburgh, that's no walk in the park, but to go down to Miami next, from there, and then have the Washington football team come in, and then, take on Houston before you go over to Kansas City for a Sunday nighter. I think, you got to really break things up into quarters and, try to win every phase, every segment of the season as you can. I think the goal for the Bills at that point has to be, hey, let's go at least 2-2. Let's go at least 3-1 in this stretch here before they get to the Kansas City game, and then, assess things from there. But at the same time too, coaches are going to give you that cliche of, hey, we can only take it a day at a time, game at a time.
One week at a time. 1 week at a time. Yeah. We're on to Cincinnati, is what Belichick once said.
Of course. Right? Of course.
So, yeah, I agree. I think it is a team-to-team situation, because let's face it, God bless him. I wish him very much. I wish him luck, in his next stop. Matt Barkley, right? He just got signed by the Tennessee Titans, who you mentioned. And, this season, being that we know how good this team is now. We know how much further we need to go, and where that is the big game, is the Super Bowl. We made it to the AFC title game. So you got to leave no stone unturned. Think of the what ifs and cross those boxes off as well. And you mentioned Mitchell Trubisky. if Josh Allen, God forbid, were to get hurt, I hope to God that does not happen. But if he did, we do have a capable backup. And in those stretches, if we still had Matt Barkley, and you're asking Matt Barkley to win 2 out of the next 3, I don't know if he could do it. And you compare Mitch Trubisky to win, 3 out of the next 4 even, I would feel more confident in that than I would Matt Barkley winning 2 out of 3. As crazy as that kind of, finagling that sounds, I feel pretty confident just in terms of the depth that they added in the draft, as well as the depth that they added in free agency with guys like Emmanuel Sanders and Mitch Trubisky to kind of check off the what-if boxes. If Cole Beasley goes down, you have Emmanuel Sanders in a more elevated role than what he's going into already. And if Josh were to go down, you mentioned it best. You have a former number 2 overall pick that, dare I say, I think he got a little bit of a bad rap in Chicago. I think, wasn't really given the pieces that Josh Allen has been given to flourish and to thrive. So, I definitely think that, this season, if you're looking at a 17-game season schedule and you're saying, record-wise, 14-3, are we talking? Are we talking 15-2? Where are you at wins and losses-wise? I know you got the schedule, but just into your head, what are you thinking?
I hate putting a number on it. I always do. I just never, because you know what I mean. But
I asked you a question.
But to be honest with you, I think this is the key. Well, just first off, the AFC is a bear. It's a deep conference. Thankfully the Bills play quote unquote in the worst division. But I can't even say that anymore. Miami was very competitive last year. Obviously, the Bills beating them in week 17, knocked them out of the playoff hunt. And then, New England's going to be back around. And, obviously the Jets are the Jets, but I think they're going to be a really competitive bunch. Zach Wilson, I like his talent. Big fan of Robert Saleh. So, it's going to be interesting to see what the AFC East is, let alone the AFC as a whole. And also, too, let's face it, the Bills, yes, they've been a playoff team before, but they haven't been in this position before where they're the hunted. Everybody knows, hey, Josh Allen, he's, potentially a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, knowing what Brian Daboll is as an OC, and then, just considering what Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, they've built, there's a lot of respect for the Bills around the league. So they're going to be treated in a different manner at that point. Teams aren't going to just look at them as the same old Bills. So, I do think that that's going to play into it for them. They do have some tough, I think some of the toughest games the Bills have are on the road, talking about the Kansas City game, follow that up with a game at Tennessee, then, you talk about playing against the Saints on Thanksgiving Day, and obviously playing the defending champs in Tampa Bay going down there. So, I think the Bills have a schedule that lends itself to, I think there might be some games where they, are looking at it as, hey, if we can split these 2 weeks coming up, that's golden. If we get 2 out, if we get back to back, hey, that's great. But I think just knowing how tough the AFC is, and, just knowing that they are the hunted now, it will be interesting to see how that plays into, the psyche of the team. But at the same time, too, just looking at the roster, looking at, Sean McDermott and Bean and what they've constructed, not just this year, just the culture they've built. How could you not expect the Bills to be, Super Bowl contender, a playoff team, and, whether they're winning the AFC East again or getting in as a wild card, whatever the case is, I think, just looking at the talent on paper, you've got to be excited about where the Bills are at heading into the season.
Yeah, it's extremely tough to put a number on it, but if you don't want to put a number on it, I get it. But I'm willing to say that 13 wins is doable again. I think 13. I look at what they did last year, right? 13-3 last year. Let's say 13-4. 13-4 this year. There's that one extra game. Maybe they lose to Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay. Maybe they lose a nail biter to Kansas City at Arrowhead. And maybe they lose the nail biter to the Saints. Maybe Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill somehow, have that big Thanksgiving Day game. I don't know. It's the NFL. Crazy things happen.
Yeah.
But
maybe New England gets them, this year. Maybe Cam doesn't fumble. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
maybe Mac Jones takes the reins and lights the world on fire. You just never know until it happens, right? I mean, we didn't think that last year Josh Allen would break out, take that massive leap into his game the way he did. So, maybe there's those new players that go from one team to their new team and they make that immediate impact like Stephon Diggs did last year. Maybe if Julio Jones stays healthy, as you mentioned before, maybe he stays healthy and Ryan Tannehill's sending Matt Ryan a Christmas card saying thanks, So who knows?
Seriously. And his old coach, Arthur Smith, too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think anything can happen. It's really tough for me to look at these AFC divisions and pick who can make the playoffs. Like I think Buffalo can obviously make it, but the Ravens and Browns, that's a rivalry that'll be a real solid flourishing rivalry for a long time with Mayfield and Lamar. The league is in just such a good state right now. And we talk about this, fusion of young players coming into the NFL and really taking over. It's got to start first at the collegiate level. And we're shifting gears. We're going from the Buffalo Bills to the Buffalo Bulls. You have an awesome podcast that I got to tell everybody to tune into. I'm gonna plug it for you. It is the Bullseye Podcast, which is the Buffalo Bulls podcast on the BLEAV Podcast Network. BLEAV Podcast Network. They're doing some great things over there. Much respect to them. I've followed them for quite some time, and they're doing some really great things. Adding this show with yourself, best decision they've ever made. I'll throw that out there. So tell me a little bit about the show and what you've experienced since the show has started. And everything of that nature.
Yeah, it's honestly crazy. When I was, applying for different jobs, when I was still at the Gazette, I honestly just applied to BLEAV through their website, on a whim. Like, hey, they had like, hey, if you have a resume, send it here, send us a cover letter to whatever. So I was like, hey, just wanted to send my stuff over. I've been doing some podcast stuff, some radio stuff, things like that. So I was like, hey, let me just, shoot my shot essentially. And they reached back out to me and were like, hey, yeah, we actually think you'd be great for UB Bulls football podcast. And the whole basis behind it is, they BLEAV has really been trying to really get like a college football series going. So the cool thing is, for example, UB opens up with Wagner, but then they play at Nebraska the week after. There's a chance that we'll be doing a combined collab show, myself with the Nebraska show host, and they also play Coastal Carolina. So that's a potential collab show coming down the line as well. So, they've really been trying to get that going. And, also too, on top of that, they really wanted to get guys who have been in respective programs. So like, for example, the Penn State podcast, Matt McGloin, the former quarterback there, he is running the BLEAV Penn State football podcast. So, just to think that, someone, I mean, hey, I did only play at UB for a season, but at the same time too, being born and raised here and knowing the history of the program and, going from Turner Gill's days to playing for Jeff Quinn to, working with Coach Leipold a little bit and now with Coach Mo Linguist, who, for me, it's full circle. Coach Mo was our DB's coach when I was at UB. So to see him coming back around is amazing. And, got to chat with him at Media Day this past week and everything. So, it's just awesome to see. And I just wish him and the Bulls the best of luck.
I love that for you, man. I really do. I'm honestly really excited for you. As soon as I saw that you had this new project, this new endeavor that you're going all in towards, I admire it, man. I really do. I gotta tell you that. Just honestly, podcaster to podcaster. But as I mentioned in the tweet to promote the show, we're from the same backyard, Lockport, New York. Lockport Lion football player. But at one point I thought you wrestled you had the body to wrestle. I don't know. You're on the football side of things, but when we first talked, I remember I was like, "Weren't you on the wrestling team?" And you're like, "No, just football." And I'm like, "Man, we could have used you on the mats there. We could have really used you."
That's too funny. No, it's funny. So I played football, basketball, and I did track and field for a couple years, and then so I come from a wrestling family. Like my uncles, they were great wrestlers, Hall of Fame wrestlers. My cousin Nashawn Morley, he literally was state champion competitor from Lockport. So yes, I come from a wrestling family, and it's funny too because so the 2019-20 school year, I won the like the Wrestling Coaches Association's media award, and they like really, 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 really took me under their wing and like embraced me so much. And, when I told them like, oh yeah, I come from a wrestling family, like that was icing on the cake. So, I just appreciate all those guys. Shout out to guys like Steve Hart at Star Point and Matt Lingle at New Fane, and, just some of the names that I've gotten to work with over that time. But no, hey, I like watching wrestling, but I was a basketball guy, so that was really what it was for me.
And obviously you played football too, so it was basketball and football. And I mean, I remember when I was wrestling, we had like a solid lineup of like the 100 to like 150, and then beyond that, as we got a little heavier, we got a little slower. And we didn't win as many matches. I won't name any names, but when I was in school, that's what took place. And I remember thinking, you're a few years younger than me, but I remember seeing you like in the halls and being like, I hope this guy is going to be on the wrestling team at some point, right? Like, I think I said something to Coach Seidel. I'm like, I hope he's on the team at some point, right? And he's like, hey, that's his decision, which to his credit, it was your decision. And obviously, basketball and football, nothing wrong with that. Those are two great sports in their own right. So, but that's something that I definitely, connect with you on, the fact that we're from the same backyard. We both have a passion for podcasting. We both have a passion for Buffalo in this area, whether it's the Bills or the UB Bulls. And, to see the show that you have in the BLEAV Podcast Network flourishing and doing really well, I'm happy for you. And you mentioned the fact that you've been able to connect with the new UB Bulls head coach. And who better to ask than yourself, being that you just had a conversation with him, this past weekend. We got a new man on the Buffalo Bulls sideline, Mo Linguist. And I want your take on, the hire. Obviously, you know him from when you played there. He was the defensive backs coach, and this was a move that was highly approved by anybody in the collegiate football scene and even in the pro ranks, being that he spent some time with the Dallas Cowboys. What are your thoughts on the new UB Bulls head coach?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what Coach Mo can put together with the Bulls. I think it's two fronts. First off, shout out to Coach Lance Leipold for all he did and just being, really, I mean, he's going to go down in history as the guy that really, truly, started the success at UB. Obviously, Turner Gill did his thing, and Coach Quinn did their things with getting the Bulls to bowl games. But, for him to have sustained success, to win 30 games over 4 seasons and, to be able to have 2 bowl wins and first 2 in program history and all of that. So, for Coach Mo, he's coming into something that's already established. But the beautiful thing is he's bringing such a unique perspective, having been, a Power 5 player himself. And then to be able to come to UB back in 2012 and have spent 2 years here to come back and, to return to the program. That's one thing. But then also you throw in the fact of his experience at the Power 5 levels, whether it was Mississippi State or Iowa State or, with Texas A&M and, just to be a guy that not only was he coming from the NFL, he was poached from Michigan. That's a blue blood program. Obviously, they've had tougher times in the last handful of years, but that's a program that anywhere around, anybody around the country that follows college football knows, oh yeah, the Wolverines, that, they're one of the
Right.
top-notch programs. So he's a guy that I always say this, he's a guy that he doesn't necessarily demand respect. He commands it. I think he's a guy that, when he walks into the room, he has a presence about him. He has a swagger about him. And I think, the guys on the team really adhere to that because of his youthful energy and spirit. But at the same time, too, he's such a businessman and has such a attacking mentality. I think he's a guy that, hey, maybe the Bulls don't have as successful as a season as they did in 2020. That was arguably the best team in program history last season. But at the same time, too, hey, I don't expect a drop off, and I expect this program to get to even bigger heights. With someone like Mo, who it means something to him to be back in Buffalo. For him to see the success that the Bulls had in the Khalil Mack era, he wants to bring that back. So and wants to just keep things going the way they have been.
Yeah, and I think from the perspective that he's 37 years old, that's a young head coach.
Yeah.
At any level, and in the collegiate level, 37 years old, but he's seen a lot. He's been in all areas of the game, whether it's positional coach at the collegiate level, positional coach at the NFL level, big programs, smaller programs, as a player at Baylor. The experience is massive for someone that is 37 years old. You wouldn't see that, he's had quite a few stops in his career, but it's been a beneficial journey. Each one of them in the coaching ranks has led him to this opportunity. And to me, when Lance Leipold, I was shocked that Lance Leipold actually stepped down and took the Kansas job. I was just shocked by it. I thought he'd be here a little bit longer, but to have that surprise, and then to see, it was honestly pretty heartwarming to see a guy really want this opportunity and show it, wear it on his sleeve. That's what I saw from Coach Mo Linguist, and I'm happy for him that he got this opportunity, because I feel like Buffalo, we want people that want to be here. Josh Allen wanted to be here. Jack Eichel doesn't want to be here. Buffalonians don't really want him here anymore now either. Mo Linguist wants to be here. I love that.
Yes,
like that.
Yes.
That's what makes me rev up for this UB Bulls season. And the fact that he's now back in the program, his interviews, he seems so magnetic as a personality. Like I feel like if I was in that team, on that locker room, I should say, I would want to run through a brick wall for the guy. So I get why he's a head coach at the collegiate level, especially. He can inspire young talent, inspire the youth, and I'm very optimistic about the future of this team, and getting into the nitty-gritty of the team itself. There are a few intriguing position battles, obviously, in the collegiate ranks within this roster, and there's a quarterback on this team by the name of Matt Myers that I'm curious as to how you see Matt Myers and his development as the starter, or will there be some competition for him at the quarterback position?
Well, it's crazy. So he had his job taken from him by Kyle Van Treese.
Right.
Going back to the 2019 season, Myers started. He was. I believe he started the first 5 games of the season.
He had that real good half against Penn State. Kind of, he was competitive against Penn State. I do remember that very well.
For sure. And then, ever since then, Van Treese has really taken the opportunity and run with it. I think just seeing how well he's managed offense and put up points, but also too taking care of the ball. He's only had 5 interceptions in the last 15 games that he's started. Right. So that one every 3 games, that's an amazing rate. Fantastic rate. So, I think, just knowing that Van Treese, he's had that level of experience. But, and this is something that I even talked about on my latest episode was, the fact that UB is at a point where, they've got someone in Van Treese who I think could be an all-MAC, player at the quarterback position. But to have a guy like Matt Myers who has experience, who, is, let's say, again, God forbid, if Kyle Van Treese were to get hurt, if Matt Myers were to step in, they aren't going to be in the situation that Van Treese was put in necessarily, when he first got onto the field as a true freshman, so he it's a little bit different there. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, like you talked about some position battles, there's definitely a few. I think the one position battle that I'm really looking to, really just trying to figure out who's going to step up at is really with the offensive line. There's been some reshuffling and, talking about Coyote Awasika graduating and, Mike Nowitzki transferring over with Coach Leipold and, just having to replace some guys. So, I think just knowing that Jake Fusak is back and Jack Clank, those two guys have some experience, so they're going to be leading the charge. But guys like Gabe Wallace and things like that, they have been really working their way through camp, and it's going to be interesting to see.
We have so many intriguing position battles. Obviously, the quarterback was the one that jumped into my mind first. That's the high-profile position. Mm-hmm. But this team has had a lot of offensive talent. We know Patterson has now moved on. He's on the Washington football team. I was so happy for him that he got that opportunity. He's one of my he's one of those guys that I love to just chat football with. I've talked to him about football on Twitter constantly. Great guy. Yeah, I hope it goes for him. Yeah, awesome guy. I want to throw shout out to him. He watches the show, so shout out to him. Thank you. I want to thank him for that.
JP.
Is JPat. So you got him as, he's moved on into the NFL and we've had some really good receivers come out of UB. Yeah. I want to get your take on some of the receivers. Who are some of the guys that stand out to you in terms of wide receivers on this team right now?
Yeah, the one name that really, really has caught my eye is Keon Williams, who to me can really separate himself. I think he's a guy, having already had experience playing at Eastern Michigan. He just transferred over. I think he's a name that has really had a lot of buzz throughout camp. And, Dom Johnson's another name. And, especially with Wilson transferring out, I think it's going to be important to see who really steps up in that receiver room. And especially with Antonio Nunn graduating as well. So, again, I just think that, those two names really are at the top of the pecking order for the Bulls. And, they should be able to, make a lot of plays this season. I think Dom, his story is amazing. The fact that he comes in, is playing quarterback, things weren't working out there, moves to receiver. But then he's also playing on the basketball team too. And, obviously the Bulls basketball team has been, very strong throughout the MAC over the last handful of years. So, to think a guy who, came in and things weren't going his way initially, but he just kept pushing, kept plugging along, and, things are panning out. It's looking like he's going to have a really significant role in that receiver room this year. So just kudos to him.
Yeah, that's a name that I've heard a lot about, preseason, practice, in terms of the physicality that he plays with, the speed,
big body,
running ability for as big of body that he possesses. That's a guy that I'm very excited to watch. Hopefully I can get back to Alumni Stadium and check out some of those games. I know for a fact that the program has grown leaps and bounds. I mean, you look at their roster, and one of my favorite things to do when I look at UB's roster is I look at where these guys have come from and gone. I mean, virtually gone are the days. I mean, and I enjoy this portion of it too. When I look at the roster and I see that the guy's from Buffalo, I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool. But UB has been able to spread the recruiting map. They've been able to recruit guys from Florida, Georgia, Texas, I mean, all over the country. It just goes to show you that they are a MAC powerhouse and that things are only going to get better. I really, truly believe with Coach Linguist and the energy that he has, it's a different kind of energy. All credit to Lance Leipold. He was a cerebral coach. I think this new coach, Mo Linguist, is an energetic coach that is perfect for this town, for this conference, and for this team. I'm very excited for the season, and I know that you are as well. We got a lot of really cool matchups. As you mentioned, Nebraska. We're gonna be playing Nebraska. That's gonna be one that everybody's gonna be tuning into that game, of course. Yeah. So That'll be fun. Now, I want to ask you about a former player on the UB Bulls, none other than Tyree Jackson. He's moving positions with the Eagles. He's going from quarterback to tight end. I loved watching Tyree sling the rock for the UB Bulls when he was here. And he had some, really cool moments here in preseason action for the Buffalo Bills as well. Yeah. And then he moved on to the XFL, and now he's in Philly back in the NFL as a tight end. How do you think his skill set would translate to that position? I'm intrigued by your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, for sure. And, just even think back to, Tyree, I remember left after the 2018 season, which was, a phenomenal season. When you think of just in terms of dual threat quarterbacks, that might be the best dual threat season quarterbacks had in UB football history, and especially getting them, to a bowl game and getting them back to the MAC title game and things of that nature. So I think it was the first 10-win season in program history, if I'm not mistaken. But, just thinking about Tyree's skill set, first of all, huge guy. 6'7", 6'8". He's a guy that's got so much length and strength to him. But at the same time, too, I think, with him, I think specifically going to Philly, going to a place where you have a Dallas Goedert, you have a Zach Ertz, I think it's nice because he is going to learn. He's not going to be thrown into the lineup right away. He's going to be able to develop. I'm sure, if things shake out the way I anticipate, he'll probably be on the practice squad, which is just fine. I wouldn't expect a guy who's literally making his first, transition to a position to be, counted on for meaningful snaps during the season. But, at the same time too, I think he's a guy that has shown, he's got the mental capabilities, being a quarterback and competing at a high level at the Division I level. I think his acumen as a quarterback, mixed with his physical gifts, I think the sky is really the limit. I think he's a guy that could become, hey, who's to say he's not the next Logan Thomas? I think, Logan Thomas just showing what he put together with the Washington football team in 2020, and dare I say, Tyree Jackson is a higher level athlete. So, we'll see. I think it's interesting for him to land in a place like Philly, like I mentioned. But, for him, I think it's just a lot of soaking up and learning right now, just taking as much as he can because he's got some really good vets in front of him.
What's curious about like that Logan Thomas, Tyree Jackson comparison that I think provides Tyree Jackson with a massive advantage is that Logan Thomas, although he was big and, built, he kind of had to work his way into that body where Tyree Jackson really doesn't. I remember watching him at UB thinking he's built like a tight end. He's built like a linebacker, or maybe even a beefed up defensive end. He's a massive man. So for him to make this decision to give this a shot, I think it's a risk that not only was he willing to take it, it's a risk worth taking. Due in large part the fact that he has the physicality to play the position. So that was something that made my ears perk up like a puppy dog when I saw that. I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And as you mentioned, I didn't even think of this thought, and you enlightened me with this one. The fact that he is on Philly with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, he's soaking up the knowledge from probably the best tight end tandem arguably in the NFL.
Most definitely. Outside of New England, maybe. Right. And obviously we haven't even seen those guys on the field together. But that's probably the best tight end group in the league. So to go to a place like that and, having I think who's a guy who's going to be a really good offensive mind with Nick Sirianni. Right. Another Western New York native, I might add. Yeah. But I just think I think it's a good situation for him because, let's take, for example, he ended up in Jacksonville where they are kind of devoid. They're bringing Tim Tebow out of retirement to play tight end. I think if he ends up there, it might be a little different. I think it's, so a situation with every player is important, but especially a young player who's really developing still.
To wrap up the show, I was segueing to Tebow talk. What what are your thoughts on this? In all seriousness, like I
Yeah.
can understand the side of it that people feel like Tebow's not worthy of the opportunity, and it's a
Mhm.
PR stunt and all that stuff, being that he's the famous Tim Tebow. And then I
Yeah.
understand, just like Tyree, everybody deserves a second chance if they're willing to switch positions and
Yeah.
change their body, the physical makeup of their body. That takes a lot of heart and a lot of determination to do that. But
Mhm.
what do you think Tim Tebow's chances are at reclaiming, a little bit of an NFL career?
I've really fought over this whole situation because it's weird. I mean, we've never really seen something like this. Like, there have been, a string of other coaches who have jumped from college to the NFL, like Greg Schiano or Pete Carroll, different guys. But I think it's different with a guy like Urban Meyer because one, he's coming from, he was out of the game for a couple seasons. I think he took 2 seasons off, in 2019 and 2020. But, then you also factor in, like, he's going to a franchise like Jacksonville where they've essentially given him a lot of control over things. And,
Right.
so it's really interesting to see that he's really molding this team in a way. I mean, it's almost like he's back at OSU or Florida or Utah where he's molding everything. So I think that kind of plays into the fact that a guy like Tim Tebow gets another chance after we saw his quarterback days not pan out, after we saw his Mets days not pan out, and the fact that he is 34 years old. I think that if he had made this move 5, 6, 7 years ago, I think it would have been, hey, this guy can continue on in his NFL career and keep it pushing. Do I think he'll make the roster? Yeah, I do. I mean, I personally do. Again, as I mentioned, who else do the Jags have to play tight end for them? Not much. But also, too, going off that, I also think that it's going to be an uphill battle for him to really make an impact. I mean, yeah, he can make the roster, yes, but to make an impact, I think is a whole different story. I think he's a guy that, like you talked about with Tyree Jackson, I don't think he necessarily needs to rework his body a ton. I mean, he already played a physical brand of football, and obviously baseball training is different than football training, so I'm sure it took him a little bit to get back into football shape. But at the same time, too, I think he's a guy that will have a role. I think he could be potentially a viable blocker, and I'm sure he could be, a guy who might be targeted in short yardage situations and underneath. But at the same time, too, I'm not expecting him to be Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews or George Kittle or Darren Waller. You know what I mean? So, I think for two fronts, like you mentioned with PR move, it's a feel-good story, Tim Tebow is a Florida native, Jacksonville native. He gets to play for his hometown team, for his old coach, and he's working with, it's arguably the 2 greatest quarterbacks that Urban Meyer ever got to work or has ever gotten to work with. Obviously Trevor Lawrence at the pro level, but the best college quarterback that Urban got to work with. So, I mean, the story is one thing, but, I think at the end of the day, just thinking about what Tim Tebow will bring in terms of playing wise and impact wise, I think there's a lot to be seen when it comes to that.
To me, it's like it's like Tim Tebow loves the game of football. That's painfully obvious. You would have to be completely in love with something to not do it for 5 or 6 years and to try it again. Like and I give him credit for that. And I know that there's a lot of people that don't really see it that way. I don't really know why, but I see it that way in the sense that he is willing to put himself out there again to be criticized. I respect that.
Yeah.
But on another hand, it's like Tim Tebow with the initials for tight end TE next to his name. In my heart of hearts, and people have laughed when I've said this, I do not believe that Tim Tebow will play a lick of tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. As crazy as that sounds, you really think about it, they might put him out there and line up as a tight end. Maybe Trevor Lawrence will throw him a few passes, but I feel like Tim Tebow's best days in the NFL were when he had the ball and he was running forward as like a dual threat quarterback, of course.
Yeah.
I think he's a fullback, running back type player in the NFL. I feel like that's where he would best be suited for. That's the position he would best fit in the National Football League level, and I think that suits him best. I definitely don't see the other tight ends on that roster, to your point, but I just think that it is a little bit of favoritism. We'd be lying to ourselves if we said it wasn't. But I also admire it. I admire the chance to try. I think a lot of people throw a rush to judgment when someone tries something new. They say he can't or she can't. It's like, hey, what happened to being hardworking and trying and being credited for trying? Yeah, you got knocked down, but you at least tried. And he got up. Yeah, he's gotten up. So to go from the disappointment of being traded to the Jets and not play over Mark Sanchez, who was a dumpster fire at that time as the Jets quarterback, and then to go to New England and not really see anything. Chip Kelly not really see anything. Go to the Mets and have a minor league baseball career, which is a feat in and of itself that I don't think it's appreciated enough. But
True.
It's a very, very interesting story, and I know it's one that you got your eye on because Tim Tebow is one of the best collegiate quarterbacks of all time. Yeah. Trevor Lawrence is one of the best collegiate quarterbacks of all time, and how this man will shift from a quarterback to a tight end, as well as Tyree Jackson. Heard rumblings of Brandon Jacobs maybe switching from as a running back in the day to a defensive end or defensive tackle. I don't know if you've seen
big enough.
He's big enough. He is.
Yeah, he was big enough.
Why not?
So, yeah.
Why not give it a shot?
No doubt. No, and just like I do really like that comment that you had of, like why aren't we applauding people more for trying, giving, they're putting themselves out there. But I think, and I really just thought of this, as we've had our discussion, like maybe he's used in a Taysom Hill-esque role, like you said, where he gets the ball in as a wildcat quarterback and things of that nature. Maybe that is the role that they have for him in mind, and they just really aren't opening up on that right now. But like we said, I think it's just a lot is still to be written on this situation. I mean, you don't see too many guys making a return to the NFL after 6 years off, 7 years off. So, hey, if there's any guy that the country would like to watch and see do that, of course it's Tim Tebow.
I would like to see Tim Tebow get his shot. I'd like to see Kaepernick get his shot. I'd like to see anyone that wants a second chance to get that second chance, regardless of the circumstance. I'm all for it. I love a comeback story. Who doesn't?
No doubt.
Who doesn't love it? If you don't love a comeback story, I don't know. I think you're just a hater if you don't love a comeback story. So
sipping haterade.
Yeah, sipping that haterade. So, Mr. Demos, thank you so much for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing more from the BLEAV Podcast Network and yourself covering the UB Bulls. This is going to be an awesome season for the UB Bulls. I got a good feeling about it. It's going to be a really great season for the Buffalo Bills as well. It's good to be a Buffalo football fan. When did we think we'd ever say that, right?
I know it's crazy. First off, I want to thank you for bringing me on. And, as great of a podcast host as you are, you're an even better person, right? So I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, buddy. I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I was talking. So I'm going to have a podcast coming out with Jonah Bronstein at some point, and we talked about it. I asked him, like, when's the last time? Because 2020, it almost it is such an anomaly because of the year that it was and COVID and everything. But the fact that the Bills and the Bulls were both, so dominant, both having such successful seasons, and we had almost no fans there to see either one of them. So I think it's a great time. Like you said, it's a great time. What a time to be, here in Western New York. And it's, like you said, it should be exciting. Both teams really have a lot to be excited about, and the Western New York faithful should be watching.
They should definitely be watching. They've been waiting for this. Some of us have been waiting for this our entire lives, and it just shows the dedication. It's unprecedented, unmatched, the dedication that Buffalo sports fans, whether you're a Bills fan, a Bulls fan, a Sabres fan, this is a really special community, as you know, and I look forward to seeing more of your podcasts for the BLEAV Podcast Network. Khari, thank you for joining me, buddy. I really appreciate it. I look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. I can't wait to see all that you have going with the show as well. Thomas Take Sports Podcast, man. That's it's crazy to see how far you've taken this thing. So I just hope, onward and upward for you here.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I'm trying. I'm definitely going to make some big waves. I got some awesome guests. You're always welcome to come back on. I'm super pumped up for this season. I know 2021 is going to be a special year.
Most definitely. Yeah, I would love to come on. We'll have to figure some things out because I'll be announcing soon where I'm going to be taking my talents to. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I definitely don't want to. Yeah, so I can't wait to let everybody know what I'm going to be doing next. But, that'll definitely play into, some of the things we get into this season and things like that. But, you mentioned to plug my social media accounts.
Yes.
It's Khari Demos on Facebook. That's KHARI DEMOS, and then on Twitter and Instagram, it's both Riri_Demos. That's RIRI_Demos. So, hey, tune in. I got my podcasts, or my podcast right there on both. You can actually stream them, or you can stream the podcast on BLEAV, but also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you stream podcasts. It's available there. So, again, Rye, I appreciate you, and just wish you the best of luck, with everything, with covering the team this season. So,
thank you, buddy. I really appreciate it. A lot of great times are ahead for yourself. I definitely wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. I'm excited for you. And I definitely look forward to chatting with you soon, buddy.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. And, definitely we'll be talking soon.
We'll be talking soon, folks. I'm Ryan Thomas. That's Khari Demos. This was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, a fully loaded show for you. Bills, Bulls, everything. We didn't even mention that coming up, Khari's joining me in my Thomas Take Sports Podcast Dynasty Fantasy Football League, the draft, August 25th, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Who am I going to take first overall? I pulled my name out of the hat on the show live. So people can't say I cheated. Who am I going to take? Maybe his initial start, J.A., maybe. We'll see.
We'll see.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Go Bills.
Yes, sir. Horns up.